Well, it's as you know, as I made it quite clear in the letter, it's not obvious precisely because of the lack of information and the secrecy surrounding these proceedings. It's not obvious whether there's going to be a treaty, whether it's going to be an agreement, whether it's going to be an accord, it's going to be a commercial contract, and and we've tried very hard to find out what it is, and the reason for that is because there are different the rules regarding the viability, sustainability, abrogation of treaties as opposed to commercial contracts in international law. There is a reason why the Iranian regime is being so secretive and circumspect about this, and that reason, I think you can guess, is because they are, from all that appears in the international media, they are selling the future of the country without the consent of the people. And they're doing their best to try to keep it hidden. And they're trying to prevent us from resorting to the various legal remedies that can be available if we knew what this document is. And diligent efforts by myself and other members of the Iran Transition Council have so far not led to a definitive document emerging from the secretive dungeons of the Islamic Republic. And until such time, I really cannot say exactly what remedies we have beyond what I was able to say in the most general terms in my letter of the 8th of July to the President of the People's Republic of China. There I made it clear that even on its own terms, even what we know at the moment, this is an unlawful engagement that the Islamic Republic is about to execute with the People's Republic of China, based on Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 21, Article 25 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We can talk about that if you wish in detail, but those are the terms on which I have based the letter on. Aside from that, there are conventions on money laundering, on corruption. There's the UN Convention, there's the OECD Convention, various other international rules and laws about money laundering, which, given the nature of the Iranian regime, we know that no contract can ever be executed and certainly not implemented in Iran without payment of bribes. That's why I warned the President of the People's Republic of China that the opposition will annul all these agreements because it is inconceivable. It is not mere speculation. The evidence is provided by the ongoing trials in Iran on a daily basis on the enormous corruption that's taking place in Iran in domestic and international contracts. And so I've said that beware, and we serve notice herewith that we will not be bound by these arrangements because commercial arrangements are procured only through corruption and by payments of bribes. And in any event, any agreement that's been reached is being done behind the back of the Iranian people and denial of the sovereign rights of the Iranian people to participate in the decision-making when it relates to the interests of the country. That, in a nutshell, is the position. Yeah, I mean, you've seen the reaction of the population to the trial and the condemnation and the death sentences of the three young men, two of whom had applied for asylum in Turkey and were, contrary to the absolute ban on refoulement, they were returned to Iran by the Turkish government. You've seen the reaction of the population in the cyberspace, in Twitter and Facebook, and this is a murderous regime, and it has no respect or regard for its own constitution, of fundamental principles of international human rights law. It's based itself on the complete denial of human dignity, the right to participate in the affairs of the state. So the population is very, very angry. I'm hoping that the lessons learned from other countries, the experience of Chile, Argentina, South Africa, and the various other countries, will be a guide to ensuring that mob justice does not take over. But listen, I'm under no illusion that we have a very, very serious problem on our hands. The population is angry, and the longer this regime exists in its murderous tyranny, the angrier the population is going to get, with the net result that the day of justice, I'm afraid, is going to be very difficult for those of us who are trying to break the cycle of violence and the bloodletting. And I've said again that we're very first decree of the, if it come the day, and I have no doubt the day will come, that the formal opposition tries to implement its policies. I'm hoping the day after the collapse of this regime, the very first decree shall be the abolition of capital punishment. And so the message of that is both to Iranian society as well as these murderous tyrants who are raping the country and engaging in kleptomania on a scale that has not been seen in the contemporary history of Iran. My message is clear to them: is the sooner they abandon this regime and join the opposition, the sooner they can expect mitigation of their sentence and for the crimes that they're committing. You witnessed only in the last 2 days the torture, a clear act of torture, which the Reporters Without Borders put out a statement yesterday saying the interview with Ruhollah Zam, a man who was kidnapped in an act of international terrorism and hostage taking from Iraq, and kidnapped and taken back to Iran, put on a trial, in inverted commas, a mockery of a trial before that mass murderer Salavati, and condemned to death. And his sentence was confirmed by this criminal entity masquerading as the Supreme Court of Iran. And they brought him on television to, and they made a mockery of justice, of human dignity. You saw, I think, there can't be many people in Iran who've not seen this, that at a time when the entire world has condemned the Iranian regime for its barbarity in the November uprising, Michelle Bachelet has been forthright, explicit and clear, unambiguous in her condemnation of the reaction and response of the Iranian regime towards peaceful protesters. These 3 young men have now been condemned to death. Ruhollah Zam has been condemned to death for doing nothing other than engage in journalism. He's now been put on television as long after the show trial is over. He's on television. He's made to laugh at the baiting by this torturer who was himself an investigator, a torturer before, and now he's masquerading as a reporter. I mean, in the current annals of international contemporary history, I can think of no other example of any country that is engaged in this kind of practices. You know, in the Soviet Russia, of course, there were show trials, and in Eastern Europe they used to have show trials, but of this nature, where after a man has been condemned to death, and any moment, I mean, at the time when this interview is taking place, he might have been hanged. To bait him like that and make a mockery of human life it really shows the depths of depravity to which this regime has fallen. I can understand if people are angry, and they're very angry. My only plea shall be that anger is not going to solve our problem. We've got to break this cycle. We've got to show that we are better than these people. We've got to show that our effort is about securing the dignity of the Iranian people that has been trampled on over the last 41 years by this obscurantist tyranny. We've got to show that we are better than these people, not least because on a practical side, if we want to be able to extradite them once most of them flee, and you know, most of them are trying to build a nest egg for themselves In Canada, Khavari is an obvious example. I've had reports that Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, is investing heavily in Australia. And we're on their trail. Of course, we're on the trail of these assassins and these kleptomaniacs. But my message to the Iranian people would be, if you're trying to make sure justice prevails and we're able to extradite these people back to Iran, we've got to make sure that that we comply with international law. International law, certainly in Australia, in Canada, in the European Union, does not permit the extradition of anyone to a country that has capital punishment, that doesn't guarantee the right to a fair trial. What kind of an example would that be if the morning after the collapse of this murderous tyranny masquerading as Islamic Republic, what happens then if on that morning after we see a repetition of the scenes that we saw the morning after the collapse of the Pahlavi monarchy, with those firing squads, those barbarians like Khalkhali? Remember when they were proud of 5-minute trials, and their leader, the late unlamented Mr. Khomeini, saying, but criminals don't deserve a trial. The imbecile had no understanding that the basics of criminal law is the presumption of innocence, that you're innocent until you are proven guilty. How do you know someone is a criminal unless you've had a trial? We must not repeat those mistakes, because if we do, it's the beginning of the very, very slippery road that leads to today. It's my hope. It's my hope, and I, for one, certainly do everything in my power to convey the message that if we want to be able to break the cycle of bloodletting, and also to be able to ensure that the hundreds of billions that have been stolen from the public treasury, and to be able to extradite back to Iran these criminals who have fled the country. I use the word criminals because some of them have already been convicted, even by their own Iranian courts. I would prefer to say the accused, to bring them back and put them on trial under the protections of international criminal law. We must ensure that we adhere to the basic principles of a fair trial. Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights guarantees the right to a fair trial. And unless we can guarantee that, please visualize the spectacle of the day that the opposition-led government in Iran is unable to extradite a single one of these people from the European Union or Canada because we are unable to guarantee a fair trial. Khavari and these other mass murderers, he's not a murderer, he's a criminal on a different level, would be laughing at us if after all this effort we end up in the same situation where they're all abroad and we can't extradite them. So the answer, that's a long answer to your question, but I will do my best, everything in my power, to ensure that this message is conveyed to the very angry and justifiably angry population of Iran. And I might plead with them that we need patience. We will deliver justice. We'll extradite these people back to Iran, and we will bring back the money that they have plundered and looted. And the only way we're going to do that is to guarantee the right to a fair trial, respect for the dignity of human. If we don't do that, well, it's going to be the same circle all over again. Well, it's now out of our hands, obviously. It's now in the, I filed a complaint, and the evidence is overwhelmingly there. And I noticed the Iranian regime, through its proxies, cyber army, as well as its agents, is trying to pretend that this was nothing to do with us. Well, if anybody who attends the monthly hearings where his arraignment is renewed by the court, they will see there's no question that it was me who filed the complaint with the prosecution service. But from that point on, it's in the hands of the prosecution service, and clearly, obviously, I'm mindful that Iran sees in Swedish nationals as they have done some very young people in Iran. And clearly the information that's come to me is they're trying to use them as hostages, as bargaining chips to try and get Nouri released, because the Iranian regime has finally realized that this is a very, very serious threat to it, not because of what Hamid Nouri knows, but because the conviction of Nouri for genocide, for crimes against humanity, for torture, for the continuing crime of disappearance would be a condemnation of the Iranian regime. It would open the possibility of a resolution before the Security Council of the United Nations to have Iran condemned as a genocidaire regime, which of course means an immediate reference to the International Criminal Court, which there is a precedent for that. You recall that Mr. Bashir in Sudan was referred, even though Sudan was not party to the Rome Statute and was not party to the International Criminal Court. And then you know what happened. An international arrest warrant was issued against him, although he enjoyed impunity in traveling to various countries that have no recognition of what the law is, and there's no conception of law in those countries. And I think you know the kind of countries I'm talking about, Syria of Assad and various other places. But the minute he went to South Africa, you remember what happened? There was immediately the human rights activists pounced and got a court order to seize him. Jacob Zuma, in defiance of that order, let him go. And you know what happened to Jacob Zuma? One of the claims against his government collapsed, and he was removed. One of the claims against him is that he defied contemporary international criminal law. Now, if we are able to get Hamid Nouri convicted for these kinds of international crimes, and I have no doubt we will. I have no doubt whatsoever, and I repeat through your camera that he will not be exchanged with in exchange for the release of hostages. You'll notice that these young men were seized a few weeks ago, and the news has been completely blacked out because they're trying to pressurize the Swedish government into some sort of an arrangement. Of course, the Swedish prosecution service is totally independent of the government. They were not engaged in that kind of activity. So Nouri will be convicted. I have no doubt he'll be convicted, but it's not really in my hands anymore. My focus is very much on arresting the next Nouri. We came within a whisker of arresting Mr. Ghulam Reza Mansouri, you will recall, and he fled Germany. He went to Romania and was assassinated there. And the reason for his assassination, I have no doubt at all. His reason for his assassination was the Iranian regime has understood the implications of a trial and a conviction for torture and for other egregious crimes that are subject to universal jurisdiction. And should one of these people become convicted, the door to the Security Council of the United Nations will be open for us to bring a resolution through some friendly governments who have committed to us that they will do it on the floor of the Security Council. And I cannot believe that Russia would stand in the way of a genocide resolution. They didn't stand in the way of it, and they didn't veto the Sudan resolution, even though neither the United States nor China nor Russia were members of the International Criminal Court, and yet they allowed that resolution to go through precisely because of the finding of genocide by the UN investigators. So our effort isn't just to arrest these individual accused and put them to trial. Our effort is to put the entire Iranian regime on trial and to demonstrate that this is indeed a genocidaire government engaged in the most egregious crimes against humanity, and it has no place in the community of nations. And the sooner the international community helps us to remove it, the better this bacteria of genocide and torture and violation of human rights is removed, the better. It is as dangerous to the global body politique as is indeed the coronavirus.